So before we launch into the School of Shabs, I have a message for you from Temi. Temi is a final year student studying media and communications, and he's going to share some thoughts on music and black culture.
When I think about black music, the word that comes to mind is limitless. I feel like there is black influence in all genres, and for many genres, they were even pioneered by black people, but you wouldn't even recognize today just because of the way genres develop. So, for example, Jersey club music was pioneered by a guy called DJ Tamil, but now it's turned into like a pretty whitewashed genre. But again, there's so many genres where black people are really at the forefront. I mean, obviously hip hop, and then you have jazz, which is now being dominated by black artists and black bands. But yeah, I think the constant word that does pop into my mind when I think about black music and black culture is limitless.
Welcome back to the School of Shabs on a lockdown Wednesday. So let's carry on the conversation about supervision. In today's video, I want to cover the feedback loop, the mutual feedback loop that should be part of every supervision relationship, every supervisory relationship. So I'm talking about feedback between perhaps a practice educator or a student, or a team manager and a social worker. It's quite timely to be having these conversations as many social work students have either already started their placements or are about to start their placements. Also, I wanted to actually respond to some of the direct questions I've been receiving. And one of those questions from both students and staff have been around, well, what can I do? What responsibility can I take for shaping my supervision, and raising some concerns if I feel my supervisory relationship is not as healthy as I want it to be. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing two tools with you today. One tool, it's around feedback. One tool is to open the feedback loop, and the other one is to close the feedback loop. But before I do that, I'm also going to share some practical tips of perhaps what, as a student, you might want to think about in addressing some of these issues. I don't have all the answers, but one thing I will say is silence is not an option. And I'm going to repeat that. Silence is not an option. So let's start on some practical advice. Now, I know this takes a lot of courage, particularly as a student. There's the power dynamic. You're on placement. There's the nervous energy and the risk factor. You're thinking about, okay, what risk am I taking here by sharing my concern? So I absolutely understand that. But as I said, we have to do something about that. If you think about the circle of influence and what we can do to influence change, I guess I'm asking you to think about that and how you're gonna impact that change. So some practical tips. So first of all, you need to engage in the art of thinking. You yourself need to do a temperature check. You need to check yourself first. What is concerning you about the supervisory relationship? And you have to be specific as you can and honest with yourself. Because when we are emotional, we tend to make assumptions. We tend to react. So you need to be really clear. What are the facts? What is the evidence? Example, my supervisor's missed 2 supervisions now, and that time hasn't really been made up for me. So you need to work through that first. I would suggest writing it down, acknowledging those feelings, maybe using a tool I shared in my previous videos, the feelings wheel or the blob tree. Think about, how am I feeling? How much of this is about projection or transference, and what are the facts and evidence? Okay, so that would be the first thing I would say. Remember, what you need to do is lower your emotion and raise the objectivity. That's the best platform to engage in feedback. Okay, point 2. I would suggest finding a friend that you can speak to, and try and choose a friend who you know is going to be, who's not going to agree with you, who might challenge your thinking, and not just agree with everything that you say. Number 3, try and engage in some perceptional positioning. So this is where you imagine that you're the practice educator or the manager. If you were in their shoes, how might you like to receive feedback? Point 4, think of a time when you've received critical feedback. What was good about the way that was delivered to you? What was not so good about it? What have you learned from that process? Can you apply any of that? Point 5, remember your learning agreement. Your learning agreement, if you're a student, would have stipulated someone else that you can speak to in the absence of your manager, or if indeed there is some mediation required between you and your manager, your practice educator. So what kind of relationship do you have with this person? Is this person someone you can speak with? So you're thinking all these things through before you enter the platform of providing some feedback. Point 6, is there a learning lead in your organisation? I know in my organisation we have a very strong learning lead, and she is someone we can absolutely go to. So if you do have someone who coordinates all the placements, can you seek some advice from them? Point 7, are there other students in your organisation? Are you having student forums? Is this somewhere where you can get some support from? And point 8, if you have a practice educator who's undertaking the course, then someone like me, a practice assessor, will come and observe the supervisory session, 2 probably. And this is an opportunity where they will hopefully pick up on any concerns and then provide that feedback to your supervisor, your practice educator. But also this is an opportunity for you, because there's an allocated time where they'll speak to you separately. So this, and ask you how the placement's going. So this is an opportunity for you to share with them any concerns that you might have. So those are some practical steps. Now I know, as I started off by saying, I know it's a really worrying time. I know it raises anxiety when you have to give feedback to someone who's in a position of power. But a new study published in the Journal of Behaviour Therapy really did show some amazing results, that 91.4% of our predictive worries don't really come true. So bear that in mind and think of the practical steps that I've just outlined. Now, if none of the practical tools that I've just shared with you are feeling safe, or you're feeling that the risks are far too high, this is something I feel I can't do on my own, then this is absolutely time to call in your tutor and have a 3-way meeting. Don't delay it. It's going to eat up into your placement time and your learning opportunities. So be brave, be courageous, and call in your tutor. So, as I said, I'm going to share 2 models with you around mutual feedback loop. So, Robert Hawkins and Robin Shohick, 2006, refer to a model known as CORBS in their book Supervision in the Helping Profession. Now, I find this model extremely helpful, and I use this transparently in supervision when providing feedback, but I also encourage my student and my staff to use it when they're providing feedback to me as their supervisor. So let's have a look at this model in more details and how you might use it as a student social worker or a staff member to open up the feedback loop with your manager or practice educator. So I would really suggest that when you want to give feedback, you are absolutely making it clear. So the first part of the CORBS model is the C, that you'll make it clear that you would like to give feedback. You might even share that this is the model that you're using to give feedback. Don't be vague, because this really increases anxiety for the receiver of the feedback. So for example, I would like to give some feedback on supervision today, on our supervision, on the missed supervisions. So you're being very, very clear on what you're about to give feedback on. So let's move on to the O, owned. So use I statements to own your feedback. Feedback, remember, is your own perception, so acknowledge that. but use facts and evidence if you have any. When I was explaining the practical steps, when you're thinking it through, what's the fact and evidence? Separate that from feelings. The next thing is R, regular. So timely feedback is the best, but I appreciate that you might have been sitting with your anxiety and not being able to give this feedback yet, but ideal is timely feedback. So the regular is about building feedback into supervision so that you or the supervisor don't build up things so they become grievances and start eating into your placement time, but also it will impact the relationship. So try and make sure that a feedback loop is a part of regular supervision, whether you've had to introduce it or whether hopefully your manager or supervisor is introducing some kind of model to receive feedback. The B stands for balanced. So balance both positive and negative feedback over time. Now that you've found your courage and you're feeling brave, don't go criticising your supervisor or your practice educator in every single supervision session. I don't think that will bode well for the relationship. So balance it out. And remember to say the things that they're doing well as well, because we do need feedback as well. And the S is for specific. So it's really, really important to be specific rather than making generalized statements. So specific feedback is the most productive and allows more for change to be felt and noticed. So be specific. So the Corb's model was a feedback model to open up the conversations about feedback. But feedback without having a model to receive and be accountable for feedback, in my opinion, doesn't work as well. So we need both to work together. So this is why I'm introducing a model to you known as Steps to Accountability. Now this comes from leadership literature, from a book called The Oz Principles. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it demonstrates the vital role that accountability plays in the relationship and feedback. So this model is see it. So what is the reality I most need to acknowledge? So this is now the practice educator or the manager receiving feedback. So what do I need to acknowledge here? Okay, there have been missed supervisions and I haven't been able to make up for that. The next thing is own it. So how am I involved in this? What role have I played? And what can I do to be part of the solution? So how am I going to rectify this? How am I going to make sure that there are not missed supervisions going forward? And how might I offer some time to make up for those missed supervisions? So I'm owning it. The next step is solve it. So what else is there that I can or should or could be doing to minimize this happening again? So again, do I need to ensure I know that as a practice educator, I need to be providing weekly supervision? I know as a manager that I should be providing supervision monthly. In the time of COVID, we might want to think about increasing that, making it more regular. So what can I do? I might just put in supervision at the same time regularly, and that's my protected time, and make sure that my manager or someone else in the organisation is not booking meetings in that time. And then the final step is do it. So what do I need to do and when do I need to do it by? And making that very clear and being accountable for that. And this is a model which helps to close the feedback loop, to show you have taken notice, and more so that you will take action. And I would really suggest agreeing to review it. So going back to thinking, okay, this is what we agreed based on the feedback that you provided me as my student or as my staff member. Is this now happening? Review is extremely important. So I've shared two models with you, one to open up the feedback and one to close the feedback. These can be used by either or practice educator, student, supervisor, team manager, staff member, social worker. I think it's important for everyone to have tools at their fingertips that they can use. But feedback is such an important part of the supervisory relationship. Feedback informs reflection. The two are so connected. and really are vital for one another. So I do a lot of practice assessor work, as I've mentioned before, and that's observing practice educators providing supervision to their students. And I have to say that the feedback loop is a rare sighting. I often see supervisors or practice educators providing feedback to their students, but I very rarely see practice educators asking for feedback themselves. So this is an absolute must. You need to create that habit. If you're not already receiving feedback or using a model to give feedback and receive feedback, then I hope that you will consider it and start introducing this into your supervisory relationship. Now, you might be met with initially, oh no, everything's fine, you're perfect. But give it time. If you create the habit and just roll with the it's fine, eventually, trust me, once the relationship is built and the student feels more comfortable, they're able to absolutely give feedback. But also, at least you're providing that opportunity. So if there are some concerns or anxieties, the model is there available for students to provide that feedback. So I really hope that practice educators and team managers are watching today. And whilst watching, we're asking ourselves, what do we do to make sure that feedback is reciprocal? Are we asking our students and our staff for feedback on us, on how they're finding us and how they're finding supervision and how they're finding their placements or their roles at work? So thank you very much for watching my video today. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with more tips around supervision. But in the meantime, a lot of you are watching, but please also subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to like, follow me on Twitter, and send me any questions. I look forward to receiving your questions. And take care, stay safe. Bye-bye.